Is everyone ready? I'm attorney Ben Crump, along with attorney Mark Crudis. We have the honor of representing the family of Irvo Otieno. Present with us is his brother, Leon Otieno, and his mother, his heartbroken mother, Caroline Oko. Thanks to Commonwealth Attorney Ann Baskerville in her efforts to be transparent before the video or the videos will be released to the public. She gave the family the courtesy to watch the video first to try to gather themselves for when the public gets the video, and they are then going to be overcome with family members, friends, not only here in the state of Virginia, not only here in the United States of America, but from their native land of Kenya. And the family is very grateful to her and her office for that accommodation. What we just viewed on the videos leading to the death of Irvo was a commentary on how inhumane law enforcement officials treat people who are having a mental health crisis as criminals, rather than treating them as people who are in need of help. I mean, it was inhumane when you see how they treated Irvo. He, in the videos, are never confrontational with them. He is not posing a threat to them. He's not violent or aggressive with them. You see in the video, he is restrained with handcuffs. He has leg irons on. And you see in the majority mark of the video that he seems to be in between lifelessness and unconsciousness. But yet, you see him being restrained so brutally with knee on his neck, the weight of 7 individuals on his body while he's face down, handcuffed with leg irons. And you say, my God, why? It is so unnecessary. It's so unjustifiable. And you keep searching in your heart for which one of them will have the humanity to say that 11 minutes is far too long to have him down with the weight of our bodies and knees on his neck. It's far too long. It borders on intentionally trying to inflict some great harm on him, and you say, for what? For what? I mean, you got him. He's handcuffed. He got leg irons on. If you just left the room and left him in there,
There's no danger
There is no danger posed to anyone. So why do you have to be so brutal to Caroline's baby boy? This was a mental health crisis. He wasn't committing a crime. His mother, even when they came on that Friday, she told them about his mental health and that she believes he was having a crisis, and how she hugged him to try to keep him safe. But they took him away from her, and she couldn't protect them anymore.
They were tone deaf.
They were tone deaf, as she said, as she pleaded with them at the hospital on Friday. She pleaded with them, let me see my child. I can help the situation, but they never let her see him. She never saw her son alive again in person from that Friday when they took him away from her, as she hugged him like a mama bear, trying to protect him from people who did not see the humanity in her son. And you say, why? When you see the video, you ask yourself, if that was your child, would you want them to treat your child who's having a mental health crisis in the manner that they treated Irvo? And so, when we think about the tragic killing of George Floyd, you say, why would any law enforcement officer put a knee on the neck of a person who is face down, handcuffed, and restrained? Why would anybody not have enough common sense to say, we've seen this movie before? If we continue to put pressure and weight and a knee while a person is in a prone position, we know how this movie is going to end. Why did they let this episode of these videos end in the similar manner that we saw it end with George Floyd? A lifeless human being who is handcuffed and restrained, who was not posing a threat, was not being violent, was only trying to live, only trying to live another day. Why would they do this to him? And so we're here with his family to say, we're better than this, America. We are better than this. And we have to change laws. We have to prevent anybody else's child from being taken from this earth the way Caroline's child was taken from this earth by the people who were supposed to care, by the people who were supposed to extend the benefit of consideration, the benefit of their professionalism, but most importantly, the benefit of their humanity for a fellow human being. Forget all this stuff about he's a detainee. He is a human being.
That's right. That's right.
He's in your custody. And if we learned anything from the trial of the killers of George Perry, when he's in your custody, he's in your care. So you all are going to get to see that commentary in the very near future. There are going to be many questions that Caroline and Leon had, you get questions. We have to answer those questions together as brothers and sisters, children of God, that Leo deserve better than what he. At this time, I have the pleasure of having my co-counsel, who's one of the best civil rights in the state of Virginia, has represented dozens of families whose civil rights and constitutional rights have been violated by law enforcement. Many wrongful death, 1983 civil rights lawsuits right here in Virginia. He is a champion for justice, and I am very proud to represent this family with attorney Mark Crutis. He will address you before the family address you, and then we will try to take your questions. But Attorney Crutis has been from the inception of this tragedy, documenting every aspect of it. And he's going to share with you the benefit of the information that he gathered even before watching the video. But watching the video frames it up with what he knew before we saw the video. And there's nobody better to break this down than Attorney Crutis.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. On the drive down here today, it was very difficult. I was in communication with the family this morning. They knew what they were going to be seeing today. They knew how challenging it was going to be. But the brutality of it was well beyond what we anticipated seeing. And the brutality of the circumstances and the questions in connection with this matter began before the 6th. On the 3rd, there was a huge show of force. You are draped in front of me. You represent about half of the police officers that were present on the 3rd when Irvo was taken initially into custody. And he went peacefully. He went to a local hospital, Parham Hospital, and we are disturbed and questioning why he left that facility. He needed mental health help. He needed help from physicians, not the brutality of correctional officers. It was at that facility that he should have gotten help, but he was actually whisked out of the hospital before his mother knew that that had occurred. And then he was transported over to the jail, which is not far away. And we saw more than just the video with regard to the events at Central State. We saw the brutality of the 5 deputies, I counted them, rushing into a small cell with a metal bed and a hard wall behind there. But we shielded the family from the events that we saw before that, which was, and I'm sorry, but he's naked in his cell. He's being treated in a subhuman manner. It's a cold day he was there, no clothing being provided to him, feces on the floor. He does have handcuffs put on him, and yet when the handcuffs are put on him, he's force rushed, and about 5 deputies get on him at that point. That begins, that continues the brutality that occurred. Thereafter, again, I'm sorry to say this in front of the family, but the public needs to know. He's carried out by the arms and legs, almost upside down, being carried like an animal into the vehicle. Almost lifeless, or it seemed lifeless. Then he's transported to Central State Hospital. If there really was an important medical event that was occurring, why wasn't he taken to the hospital literally one minute away? You all know that. You know the area. When he gets to Central State Hospital, I was not really prepared to see this. It was a circumstance where you see 7 deputies with their tan and brown, and the force of them is, you can see that they're putting their back into it. Every part of his body is being pushed down with absolute brutality. You cannot even see his image many times. And we kept on saying, and the family was making the statement, why? Why is this occurring? He's, as Ben said, he's in handcuffs and leg irons at that point. He poses no danger to the individuals around him. And yet they continue to apply force for an appreciable, excruciating period of time. Every part of his body being forcefully pushed down by those officers. Commonwealth Attorney Baskerville has recently put out a press release today. There were 3 other Central State employees that were arrested on second-degree murder charges because of their participation in connection with this. I know that there has been intimations that have been raised by the defense counsel in connection with this matter. Ms. Baskerville is potentially overcharging this. Nonsense. When you see that video, when it's out, you're just going to ask yourself why. And I will tell you that in the time that I've spent with this wonderful family, there have been people that have been coming to the door, have been asking the questions, why. These are people that they have not seen for years. My daughter went to Freeman High School and graduated in 2012. That is approximately the same year that Irvo graduated. He had a hip hop career going. He was into music. He was a wonderful human being. And the persons that can best tell you that are the wonderful human beings that we represent. This is a wonderful family, and we really appreciate Ben's presence in this case. As you know, he has focused on these types of issues for so long, and he made the statement as to what the public has learned from all of the other matters that he's been involved with. Can't we treat each other with respect? I'll now let the family address you.
Thank you so much, Mark. That insight is heartbreaking, but it's necessary. I was holding Miss Carolina as she was shaking as you were revealing to America the blow by blow of what happened to Irvo. And I know Kareem Ali and Clara Chesney, our investigators and paralegals, we kept making notes during the video, and you kept coming to time instances, and Mark and I would look at each other. You'll see one person take their knee off and another person put their knee on, and you said, why?
Yeah, that why was just the question kept being asked.
I mean, it's not like he's on the ground, face down, and he's not posing a threat to any of those, 13, 14 law enforcement officers and hospital personnel. I mean, he is seeming like a near unconscious person on the ground. Why so much brutality? And so we have to try to get to those answers. Not for Irvo, it's too late for him, but for the next person in America who's having a mental health crisis, that they won't be treated like this. This is becoming a pattern in America. We treat people who have mental health issues like hardened criminals. It's not right. His brother, Leon, and I hope I get this right, Attorney Crudis, his brother, Leon Otieno, who is the big brother of Irvo, Otieno. Otieno means born at night, and Ochieng means born at day, because in Kenya, you name your children based on purpose and providence. And so she had one of her babies, Irvo Otieno, born at night, and Otieno Ochieng at day. And so Leon will tell you why this was so devastating, especially considering he and his little brother's plans that they had for his trip to Richmond, Virginia before this tragedy. He was already planning on coming, but not for this. And so at this time you will hear from his big brother Leon before we introduce his mother. Yeah, Mark, you come on up too.
My name is Leon Otieno, son of Carolina Uko, firstborn of the family. Words can't describe what I just saw today. I was coming to Richmond, Virginia. I was coming home because it was my birthday weekend, and I wanted to spend time with my brother. And instead, the trip turned into a tragic, senseless, inhumane nightmare. I can't say anything right now that can bring him back. No one can bring him back. What I saw was a lifeless human being without any representation. No disregard to his human life, care. At what point do we stop preserving life? At what point do we consider mental illness a crime? Can someone explain to me why my brother is not here right now? Someone explain to me why my mother can't sleep, can't eat. We're broken. Our hearts are broken. But our spirits are strong, and my brother's spirit is not done.
That's right.
Every single family in America, you are dealing with mental illness in the family. One or two or three people are dealing with mental illness. You should not wake up and feel sick and consider whether or not you should call for help. You should have confidence in knowing that the local station, the local police, the local government is working to make sure that the care that you receive from the minute that they deal with you is at most focused on preserving your life, but not ending it.
Amen.
There is no right to ending someone else's life. It is a crime. And if you commit this crime, you will answer to the law. And the law has to prove itself. The law has, due process has to work here.
Yes, justice.
What I saw, I witnessed a homicide. I did not think in my life that I witnessed my own blood brother being murdered.
Thank you, Leon. Thank you. Thank you. At this time, at this time, you're going to hear from Ivo's mother, who thanked, as the whole family thanked Ann Baskerville, the Commonwealth attorney, for treating her son like a human being worthy of dignity and respect and the protections afforded to American citizens and human beings. The fact that, just like in Tyree Nichols' case, it should be a precedent. When you see a crime committed on video, you should charge the individuals with the crime, whether they're a regular citizen or whether they're a police officer with a gun and a badge. It has to be equal justice under the law. And that's all Caroline is praying for, is justice. And so at this time, you're going to hear from his broken-hearted mother to tell you about what she witnessed and about her child, Miss Caroline. And I'll hold
Yes.
the picture if you ask me to hold
Yes.
the picture.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caroline Ouko. Irvo Otieno is my son. Irvo was 4 years old when we came to the United States. Irvo went to kindergarten here in the United States, proceeded to Tuckahoe Elementary School and Freeman High School, and then went on to college in California. Irvo is as American as apple pie. This is what he knows. This is home for him. And when you're home, you are in a community. We live in a community. We have friends. This young man you see here had a big heart. Irvo was the guy that his classmates drew to. When they needed someone to talk to, he was the listener. He would take time to listen to them. And then he would take time to process and then lean back in. My son was a leader. He was not a follower. He also brought a different perspective to the table. If there was a discussion, he was not afraid to go the other way when everybody else is following. This was my baby. He cared for people. He cared that people were treated right. That was at the core of his upbringing in our home. He cared that people were treated equally. He would go to school when he was in middle school and invite that child who is eating alone over that table and say, man, come on, join in, let's eat together. He was kind. Even though Irvo was going through mental illness, what I saw today was heartbreaking America. It was disturbing. It was traumatic. My son was tortured, to put it right. I saw the torture. There is no way that Henrico County sheriff deputies were on him. 7 people, 7 officers on one man. And all this started when my son went to hospital on the 3rd. And that evening he was taken to jail, whisked from the back of the jail into the hospital. Those 3 days at Henrico County Jail were a horror. I've seen it on video. And I think more. But I'm here to mourn. And I'm mourning the life of this young man, my son. Mental illness should not be your ticket to death.
Right. Amen.
There was a chance to rescue him. There was a chance to stop what was going on. And I don't understand how all systems failed him.
All systems.
I don't understand why one single system could not hold up. My son was treated like a dog, worse than a dog. I saw it with my own eyes on the video.
Horrible.
He was treated inhumanely, and it was traumatic, and it was systematic. Because when you look in the first video, you see where they're on top of him, like my lawyer described. And then into Central States, it got even worse. It started and it went on and it went on until he took his last breath. He was murdered They smothered the breath out of my baby. They murdered my baby. And those are my questions. Why did they do that?
Why?
What right do they have to do that? Illness is a problem everywhere. Right here, a problem. And getting worse. With young children in school, young people needing help here and there. Talking to parents and mothers who come and they're giving me their own stories of what's going on in their homes. We could bring to churches so that when someone calls for help, respond looking for who can help them, who are know how to handle someone when they are in distress, so that we don't have to end up in this situation anymore. If my son was not lucky to survive this, I do not wish this on anyone else. I do not wish this on anyone's child or any parent or anyone else. We can do better.
We can do better.
That's well said.
For now, I'm asking for justice.
Justice.
Justice for my son.
Justice for Irvo.
Justice for Irvo.
Justice for Irvo. That's all I'm looking for. I'm looking for answers. Why was my son murdered? What was the reason? What was the reason?
No reason. Thank you.
So I need justice for my son. And one last thing I would like to say. My son was an aspiring hip-hop artist. He had found that feeling when you find your thing. He was doing. He would do his music. He would go in his room and shut the door. And he had it. He was creative and bright. I had to tell him the creative juices, just come flowing. He would write a song in less than 10 minutes. And so he put his energy with it. He was working towards his own record label. His music is streaming out there on Apple and all those streaming services. And Vo, look him up. YOUNG-VO, Young Vo. Take a minute to his music. He calls it like it is, but there is goodness in his music. And that's all I'm left with now. He's gone. All I'm left with is his voice. I'll not be at his wedding. I'll never see a grandchild out of it because someone to help him. No one stood up to stop on.
Thank you.
We
Karen.
have to do better.
Have to do better. Your baby. We Christians, this is emotional for the family, so they'll do their best. And Crudis and I will try to answer the more legal, technical matters.
Mr. Curtis?
Yes.
Can you walk us back through what happened at the Henrico jail? I know it's very sensitive. You
I'll
said
say this
very
and then
difficult.
I'll let Attorney Crudis go in detail. And I think you said it best earlier when we were talking, Mark. They are going to try to make this be episodical, but really it was a continuation. I mean, it was tragic. Every level they would escalate seemed like, and it was for what reasons. And the Henrico County Jail, that offer video of when they handcuff him, he's stark naked. Their feces, I mean, it's so inhumane. And then when they come in the room, 5 of the officers come and they take him down. And he wasn't posing any threat or anything when they came in there. And so it boggles our mind why they were so brutal.
Yes.
Said they went above and beyond.
Well, I'm so happy that you don't have to rely on an interpretation from law enforcement officials as so many people have had to do. We have ocular proof of what we are telling you visual evidence of how they treated this young man who was posing no threat to them.
No threat.
And
Yeah.
I won't get too emotional. Attorney Crutis.
Yeah, there was absolutely no threat at all, as we described it. He has leg irons on, he has handcuffs on, he poses no threat, he's face down, and it's really difficult to actually see him because throughout the duration, there are officers over every single part of him, pushing down hard, relentlessly, unyieldingly, for the duration of 11 minutes. You asked a question about the events that preceded that. So there is a cell in which he is held in, and we wanted the family to have an understanding of what occurred, so we briefly showed and permitted them to see the scene of when he's in the cell at Henrico. He's naked. He's lost, as Ben said. There's feces on the ground. It is so inhumane. He puts his hands through the tray area where food is passed through, and he's handcuffed at that point. Again, so every time that the brutality is waged upon him, he's handcuffed and or shackled at the legs. There's a forceful entry, and it's a small cell, and it's not a padded cell like they have there. They have a holding cell. There's a metal bed that is right there and a hard wall against it, and they came in with great force. His mother was worried about any type of head injury that could have occurred at that period of time. And then, as I said, we also saw a glimpse of the video where it's like an animal being carried by legs and arm with his pants falling off him into the vehicle. It is what I witnessed today was, I just can't find words for it accurately. But it leaves you asking the question that they ask, which is why.
Because they pepper sprayed him at
Yeah.
one point too, and you can imagine how disoriented you are when somebody pepper sprays you and you're in handcuffs and so forth. But they never ever try to give him the benefit of the doubt that this is a young man who's having a mental health crisis. Let's leave him in. I mean, when you look at the video, you will see it. It's 11 minutes. They didn't have to brutalize him for those 11 minutes. They could have just stood. He was by himself, handcuffed with leg irons. What possible threat could he have been? Yes.
Based on the footage from Central State Hospital, what specifically do you believe caused his death? Was it someone's knee on his neck that choked him to death? Can you give us specifics based on what you have seen and what the Commonwealth's attorney has told us?
I will say this briefly, and then I will have Mark opine on it as well. I think it was the sheer length of the weight and the force on his body that seemed to just be so unreasonable, so unnecessary. I mean, it's like Caroline, his mother, said, why? Why? I'm sorry, Mark.
Ben describes it very well, as the family does. Every part of his body is being pushed upon hard for the duration of 11 minutes. It's unrelenting. And with the OCME's office, that's our Office of Chief Medical Examiner, has used the word asphyxia with Caroline when they describe what had occurred.
Yes.
And it is just, when you see the video, you will be shocked.
I'm seeing two different things here. I'm hearing from you that the public will eventually see this video, and I'm seeing a statement from Ms. Baskerville saying that she does not plan to release the video. What should we
Well,
expect?
you should rely on the Commonwealth attorney and what she's going to do. She's been very transparent with the family, and I imagine she's going to be transparent.
What was your understanding though on how the video might be released?
We don't have any frame of reference other than we saw with Tyree Nichols and others. The family was given the courtesy, and then at the appropriate time, after all the law enforcement entities had reviewed it, then they will release it to the public. I know that we're calling for the Department of Justice to intervene in this matter because we do think his constitutional rights were violated.
Yes.
And so it may be they need to look at all the videos at this point before they release it to public consumption.
Yeah.
Two really quick questions. The timeline, just so we understand it. On the 3rd, he was being treated for mental illness, correct, at a hospital. What was the motivation for police to go and take him out of there? Was he charged with anything? Was he formally arrested, or did they just go drag him out?
Mark, you go first,
Yeah.
then Caroline has something to say.
You're asking the question that we're asking. We see no reason for them to have transferred him to a jail. We don't know what the circumstances are. We don't know what their explanation for that is. It makes absolutely no sense to us. Yeah, we don't know the totality of it. And what I will tell you that even if there was a charge, in those circumstances, generally the person is held at the hospital for a 72-hour period. Even if there is an underlying charge, whatever they may say it is, typically those persons are not released to the jail.
Caroline has something to say on that there. And I'll say this. Taking him from the hospital to the jail didn't help his mental health.
Yeah.
Right, I just
Caroline.
I think, Caroline, you could walk
Yes,
us
may I add?
a little bit too about
Good.
his mental health journey, like sort of, what was he dealing with?
Before she gets to that, she wanted to say
I'd
something to your
like
last
to clarify.
question.
I'd like to
about-
clarify about the hospital. When my son ended at Henrico Doctors Hospital, I kindly asked them to take him to St. Mary's, which is behind my house. But they insisted on taking him to Henrico Doctors Hospital. I followed them to the hospital. And at the hospital, I was there all through. This is approximately about 12:30 into the evening, when they whisked him from the back of the hospital to jail. The doctor who was treating him personally came out and told me that he was on him and treating him, and he was going to be all right. So they pulled him off treatment, took him to jail, didn't take him down there with any medicine. That's where I ask why. Why did they do that? He was on EOC. He could have stayed at the hospital for 72 hours to be stabilized before all this movement started. And I was sitting at the reception of the hospital. I made 4 attempts to try to see him in the back. They refused me. They refused me to see my baby.
What did the doctor tell you about why they took him away?
The doctor, before I left the hospital, I asked him, may I see my son? Doctor, could you intervene for me to see my baby? He threw his hands up in desperation and told me, it's the police.
Yeah, and you should also know that he was asleep for approximately 40 minutes.
Yes. The doctor told me he was asleep for 40 minutes.
So-
he was able to calm
Right.
down and sleep for 40 minutes.
He was in a relaxed mode at that point.
Yes.
The first hospital. That's the
Henrico Doctors
Henrico
Hospital.
Hospital.
How would you describe his mental health struggle? Has he battled depression?
I've had long stretches where you wouldn't even know something was wrong. And then, sometimes he went into what was happening with him when I took him to Enrico Doctors Hospital, when he just goes into, some kind of distress, and then he needs to go see a doctor. So, and he was, he's been living with that since high school, since last year of high school.
What prompted you to bring him there that day? Were you worried that he was going to harm himself, or that he
No.
was just paranoid?
No, No.
She didn't bring them there.
I didn't even take him there.
I mean, to the doctor. You brought him to Henrico.
I was calling my personal doctor. He has a personal doctor. And I was not on the phone with the personal doctor. And the assistant tried calling out for a mobile mental unit, and that wasn't there. So then that's how, police
Yes.
took him in.
Mr. Cruz, Bill Atkinson, Progress Index newspaper in Petersburg. You mentioned how 3 of the Central State associates have been arrested and charged with the same charges as the deputies. What questions are you seeking from the department that runs a Central State on this process, and what would you like to see done in the future?
Well, can I say something?
Yeah,
So what we saw from all of the employees, including the deputies, which are dressed in brown, and the Central State employees, which were in blue, is it goes from this progression of them needlessly being involved in pushing down on him hard, till the determination that he was lifeless and not breathing. And then you see people standing around with their hands in their pockets and looking away. And then there's an appreciable period of time before any type of rescue efforts are started. And then thereafter, when while CPR is being done for a period of time, you see the deputies drift away out of the room and into a conversation by themselves. All of these people were involved. Central State, the deputy's office, the sheriff's office involved. They all had a duty to look out for him. And even those people that weren't pushing on him, and there were many people in that room, they had a duty to intervene, an obligation wearing that badge to step in and say no. Ben has worked so hard, to basically have police officers think about the question, is what I'm doing right? Is what my fellow officer is doing right? It went through their mind, it had to have, and they just simply did not act.
Was there ever evidence that
It was so deep. To finish something Mark was saying, the aftermath. You saw when his body was clearly lifeless. Before they came sticking needles into him, that's when you saw the concern for the first time. Yeah. And your mind is boggled. At what point did you not understand that putting a knee on somebody's neck who's handcuffed after George Floyd is not a good thing? Right. That it could lead to someone's death.
That it will lead.
That it will lead to someone's death.
The hospital personnel that you saw, did any of them take part in the restraining of him?
They did. You could see the people with the blue shirts involved with that too.
They were actually had their hands on
Yes.
three who were charged. You believe from the video and everything took part in the restraining of him.
Yeah, and they were actually hands-on. When you look at the video, you will see initially they're standing to the side, but then they become involved in connection with it.
Do you know how long it took for state police, or why it took so long for state police to get there?
Great question. So the state police, whenever you have a death in custody like this, there's an obligation for an independent agency to come in. They were not called for an appreciable period of time. When I say appreciable time, I'm talking hours. An opportunity for all of those involved to have a conversation, a fortifying conversation potentially about what just occurred, and a conversation potentially filled with excuses as to what occurred. When the Virginia State Police should have been there much earlier, without doubt.
How much time transpired before there were efforts to resuscitate?
We didn't actually count that, but what I will say to you is it's very, very noticeable. We're all in the room watching the video saying, do something, and there's no action. People with their hands in their pocket, and then finally it begins at a certain period of time, and it is just heartbreaking to see, his partially nude, lifeless body on the ground.
Yeah, and that's what Mark and I kept looking at one another as we noting the time. Like it's like 1 minute, it's 2 minutes, it's 3 minutes, and they just all down there. And you're like, well, why do you have to stay on them?
Yeah.
I mean, all the way to beyond 11 minutes, and if you're a human being and you have all that weight and pressure on you, knees going on your neck, at what point do you cease the ability to breathe? And that's what we believe happened. And I think that's why the Commonwealth attorney is looking at this evidence and saying, hold on, you all had to know you were killing them. Yeah. Especially in the aftermath of George Floyd. You have to know when people are restrained, handcuffed, in a prone position, face down, that you don't put pressure, you don't put weight, and you definitely don't put knees on their neck.
Was he saying anything during this time?
We can't take, there was no audio, and unfortunately there was no body cam video. It was all surveillance video from what I could tell.
Let me talk about one thing. we think that the Commonwealth's attorney in connection with this case has been courageous. She has asked the question as to what is the right thing to do. And one of the reasons that we think that DOJ should be involved is that you have multiple jurisdictions. As you can see, and as Ben described really well, you have a continuum of abuse that begins at Henrico County and continues to Central State, which is in Dinwiddie County. One of the reasons that we believe that DOJ should be involved is, even though Ann is an intelligent, gutsy prosecutor, she's got those two jurisdictions, and it's a story. As you can see, it's a continuum of abuse that went on, and it has to be fully addressed in that manner. One last thing, looking around, many of you have crime beat reports and the like. Your experience with law enforcement's involvement. You all know that what law enforcement is generally doing if they ever have a combative person is to put him into handcuffs. That is the moment at which any type of argument of any type of risk to them or anybody else subsides. Here he's handcuffed at his wrists and also at his legs, with very large individuals around him. And we're troubled by everything we saw, like when he's seated on the table and a big push is being, and the family is asking, what are they doing at that point? Why are they doing that? It's hard. No, that's at Central State that I'm describing. When he first comes into the room, he seems almost lifeless, and we just kept on asking, why are they doing? There is absolutely no evidence of him being combative in any way whatsoever. I underscore. No, so what there's a chair that he seems to be seated on, and then you see these officers pushing pressure on him, and then there's a certain point at which it seems like they're pushing on his head. When he's down on the ground, there were yells in the room because you could see his hair being pulled, and you could see knees toward his head. It was excruciating to watch. It really was.
They pushed him to the ground, and we don't understand what precipitated him from being pushed to the ground, because he's handcuffed, he's in the leg irons, he's up against a chair, and then for whatever reason, as Mark was describing, they push him down, and they're pushing him down. He's face down, and then all the bodies pile on top of him. That goes on for 5-6 minutes, and then they turn him over, and then they pile on top of him from that position. And so you're saying, why do you keep
a total of 11 minutes?
A little over 11 minutes
of the pressure being placed upon him. When he's seated and they're pushing on him, that's an additional time. To give you an understanding, there's a camera in the corner, and so the camera is shot over the corner. Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Sorry about that. The camera is shot over the corner, and then you can see Ivo's back, and then you can see the two officers that were initially 2 to 3 officers that were pushing on him when he was seated. Then when he's pushed to the ground, the other officers join in at that point. And there are you can see the level of force that is being applied to him throughout his body, his hands, his back, his legs. There's not a portion of his body that is not receiving pressure for an unrelenting period of time for about what we thought was about 11 minutes.
And Caroline asked me to let you all know there's video when they first came to the house, and she says how they started treating them from that point, and as Mark and I said, it was an escalation. You literally see at the video at the house, Caroline hugging her child as if she's trying to protect them from these people who might not see him like she sees him. See him? No, it's a cell phone video from a neighbor. And there's a lot of officers there then.
So
hold on 1 second.
So you have a circumstance where there are many officers, I counted 10 or 11, arranged in front of them. And his mother is draping herself around him because
and telling them that he has mental health issues. Sure, we'll get it to you.
We will get it to you. Yeah, we will.
Have you found out yet what the
We'll take a couple more questions.
call was for that day on March 3rd?
So what we understand was, I don't want to belittle in any way the statements that were made about it, but it was a mental health distress moment for Irvo, and so it's something like gathering together solar lights that a neighbor had on his property. That's what I understand. It was just the outcome of an undergoing mental health distress, not an intentional act. Look, I think that what is demonstrative is how difficult it was on his mother. She sees him in distress. What does she do at that point? She called over to his doctor and the like, but then when the police came over at the behest of the neighbor, she was imploring them, treat him appropriately, bring him to a hospital, and he was vacuumed into the criminal justice system for which there was no care that was provided that we saw. We saw during the entire time that he's at the jail, we know of no medication being provided to him during that period of time. And if you know about mental health issues, you know that he's continually decompensating during that period of time. So in other words, they're creating the very events that would occur thereafter.
Yeah, and it's like Leon said, you know, who do you call when it's a mental health crisis, especially if you're a black parent or a black family? Because far too often the critical point whether your loved one will live or die is based on not just their mental health status, but also the color of their skin. And that is something why we have to have it be a national conversation, why with all the reasons that Mark said we need the Department of Justice to look at this, we need the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division to also look at it, because far too often when black people have mental health crisis in America, it ends up being a death sentence.
Yeah.
Have you been hospitalized before? And how did that end up? Have you been hospitalized for?
That's the question that I'm asking. Why this time he didn't come back home? Yes, and he came back home without a problem. Why this time?
Last question.
Why this time?
To share what,
No,
a diagnosis.
Not at this time.
This time.
Last question.
Is it the family's opinion that the public should see this video?
Yes.
We always believe in transparency. That is a hallmark of what we stand for. And the reason why, let's be clear about this. We go all over America arguing that the issue is mistrust, going both ways, from marginalized communities of color and law enforcement, because oftentimes we see two justice systems in America. We see people in our community arrested, charged, and convicted without a shred of evidence. But yet, we have these videos, these body camera videos that the public has paid for. And then when you get the videos that the public has paid for transparency, they then say, well, there's a pending investigation. You can't see what's going on. Now, why do we have the video cameras if people can't see what transpired in the video? How do we build trust unless we have transparency and then we have accountability? And that equals trust. That's the only way we can heal America, if we have transparency so everybody can see what's happening. And then we have accountability. So when we see when there's something in our community where a person did bad, we want them to be held accountable. But then when the police do something bad to us, we want them to be held accountable too. And then we can trust that the system works fairly, that it's equal justice under the law. And so that's why we believe in transparency, whether it's George Floyd, whether it's Breonna Taylor, whether it's Tyree Nichols, whether it's Joseph Richardson, Terrence Crutcher. I mean, anytime there's video, the public should be able to see the video, because that is what's going to help us heal if we see accountability on every level.
I just like to say to the family, to the mother and family, I feel your pain. That's right. I've been there, and I feel your pain.
Thank you.
But it's something about that doctor. When he did this to you, he shouldn't have let your baby go. He shouldn't have let your baby go with those police.
You know, and I have to say, when you see mental health situations, oftentimes, you want to say something?
You go ahead.
Yeah.
You go.
You know, oftentimes in the community that I live in, that I reside in, mental health is dealt with a degree of tenderness, concern, sincerity for the position. That is what should have happened to this young African American, but instead he was treated with brutality, absolute brutality. And so we are so happy that Ben is here to focus the presence, focus his attention and his concern along with the family as to the disparity of treatment between the African American community and the Caucasian community, the white community, with regard to these types of issues. It's stark.
Thank you, Mark. And Caroline was going to make one last comment, and then we were going to let them get some rest.
I want to make one last comment, and this is pertaining to listening when a relative or a mother is trying to advocate for their loved one. When my son was in distress, he could not be the one to articulate himself and advocate for himself. I was denied that opportunity to advocate for him. And I'd also like to say that I had no choice. By the time they took him from my home, they handcuffed him. I'd also like to say that it's not only me who is mourning. This young man had good friends in the community.
Yeah.
My community is mourning.
Yeah.
I'm seeing people I haven't seen in a couple of years. Some are Googling my address and they're coming home and knocking the door, and neighbors are walking up, coming to, express their condolences. So when they took my baby away, when they took his life away, they took him away from me, they took him away from his brother, they took him away from his nieces, they took him away from his friends, and they took him away from a community that cared and loved him. And if one thing comes out of this, I pray and hope that moving forward, the officials can look into putting something in place so when people call, when they're in mental distress, they can get real help, and they can get the good help that they need, get the treatment that they need, and come back home to their loved ones.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm lucky to have Attorney Crudy and Attorney Crump on my side. And with them too, and God, and my family, I think I'm in good hands as we pursue justice for my son. Justice I want.
Justice for our
Questions
vote.
I have.
Justice for our vote.
Answers I need. Because my son's life was taken away from him. He was murdered. And it should not go in vain. As long as I'm living and I have breath in me. His father died 6 years ago. But as long as I'm living and I have breath in me, I will step for my son. 10 toes down